Get that figured out. I'll check it all out this week. So.
I was saying no to Jack, not to you.
Oh, okay. So you guys are getting it? Okay, all right. Well, I can't figure out why they wouldn't be coming through. All right, so we're continuing our series on this great man, David. Last week we talked about facing our giants. I've been facing the giant of walking pneumonia and a severe sinus infection all week long. So most of my preparation for this message took place yesterday. So bear with me if I start talking about peanut butter, because that's basically what's in my head right now, and it's kind of pretty much how I feel. We're talking about David, this man that went from the pasture to the palace, and it's what a great story. Today we're going to learn some cool things. We've talked a little bit about how God has, in developing this man to be a king, he not only has some great victories, but he has some real heartaches and trials. Today we're going to look at how he loses every crutch in his life. Every prop that he leans on, he loses. And this is part of what God uses to build David into one of the greatest kings, or the greatest king that has ever lived. This man, who was a man after God's own heart, and who is, really, to me, probably one of the greatest characters in the entire Bible. But today I want to talk about a friend for the journey. So let's just quick review. We talked about, we started out with, the people wanted a king, so they didn't want God as their king anymore. They rejected the Lord as their king. They wanted a man, so they chose a man that was head and shoulders over everybody else. They chose him by his what? By his looks, his size. And so God doesn't look at the size, he looks at the heart. He doesn't put the measuring tape on, if he wants to call you into any kind of service, he doesn't put the measuring tape on your bicep, he puts it on your heart. And so that's what he did with Saul. Now Saul goes on and he basically turns his back on God, rejects God. Man, there's some, today you'll see some of the wicked things that he did. When he turned his back on God, and he just got harder and harder and harder and harder, and it made him more bitter and more bitter and more jealous and more mean, and he wound up killing priests and all kinds of stuff in his life. So God, knowing that this man didn't have the right heart, anoints this young boy out of the tribe. Remember, he takes all of Jesse's boys and he looks at all of them. Even Samuel's impressed by the size and the height of Eliab, the oldest son, and he's like, where's the rest of the boys? And they bring in little David from the shepherd field, and Samuel anoints him to be the next king. He goes back out, tends to his sheep. This is where we get a lot of our Psalms. Remember, a lot of the Psalms were written when he was, I think, like when you look at the 23rd Psalm, David wrote that from the perspective of a sheep, remember. And so he was the shepherd, they're the sheep, and then he related that to our Heavenly Father, and so on. So when you read the Psalms, it'll bless your heart when you realize that this was a young man that had been anointed to be king. And so God started, and then of course we looked at facing the giants in our lives, and we talked about the giants that we face, and we asked you to name your giant. And some of you, even since 2 or 3 weeks ago when we first mentioned old Goliath, who is your Goliath? What is your Goliath in your life? Many of you have been hit by one. I mean, it's like all of a sudden, I never faced a Goliath like this before. And so, but the Lord is preparing your heart, just like he prepared David. He was prepared for Goliath because what? This is your quiz. The lion and the bears. He had to face the lion and the bear. God allowed the lion and the bear. He whipped the lion and the bear, so he knew he could whip Goliath. And he never bragged one time on his ability to fight lions and bears. He said, God delivered them into my hand. And so the same thing was true with Goliath. God delivered him into my hand. When he goes out into great battles and he builds this reputation of being a great warrior, it's because God gave them into his hand. God was with him wherever he went, the Bible says. And it says that he was successful in everything he did because the Lord was with him. Now that's a phrase that you and I should be thinking about pretty carefully. The Lord, you can be successful in everything you do because the Lord is with you. If he's not with you, you might have a little bit of temporary success, but you're not really successful. And again, like I said, we talked about facing our giants. We talked about those 5 smooth stones. And now today, we're going to talk about a friend for the journey. We're going to talk about 2 things. We're going to look at the props that David leaned on that got knocked right out from under him, so that he had to learn to lean only on God. But God gave David a very special friend. What was his name? Jonathan. And what happens is we begin pick up our story in chapter 18, and I'm just going to tell the story as we go along rather than to read 3 chapters of it to bore you to death. By the time I look up, you'll all be asleep and you'll hurt my feelings, and so we're not going to do that. I'm just going to tell the story and bring it out as we go. All right. So, and I wouldn't blame you. I'd probably go to sleep too. Well, what happens in we're going to go to chapter 18 to chapter 22, and I'll go through it pretty fast. And what happens is, at the beginning of chapter 18, Jonathan and David meet, and immediately they are like knit together in their soul. And it says, that's what it says, they were knit together, they were soulmates. Now a lot of people will take this relationship and, well, you see there, God's promoting the gays. That's how we know that God's in favor of the gays. Look at Jonathan and David. There was nothing gay about these men. These were 2 warriors. These were men's men, man. These were not people who were fruity, right? And so it's really sad that they've taken this relationship and done this, right? And made it this way. But Jonathan loved David as he loved himself, and vice versa. And so these men, now I understand this relationship. I had in 1983, when my father had passed away in 1982, it was in 1982, a few months later, that I walked into a health food store, and I ran into a man, and we started talking, and we were like 2 battery cables, sparking. I mean, man, we just clicked, and honestly, I'm not kidding you, it was just like we were knit together right there. And he became my spiritual father, because I'd given my life to the Lord about 2 years before. I was on fire for God, and this old boy was 35 years a Bible teacher and on fire for the Lord, and he wound up being the man that trained me in ministry and everything. But it was at that moment, you never know in a day's time, when you walk out, who you might meet that can change the course of your life forever. And this man, and I understand this, because this is exactly, we thought alike, we had the same sense of humor, we were just like we were one. And Jacob knows, right? He would tell you that you have the same I have the same mannerisms, everything. It was really surprising. This is the relationship that these 2 men had. Well, what happens is, remember now, David is made king only after all of these props and all of the human crutches are knocked out of his life. Now, Saul wanted the approval of people. David wanted the approval of God. This is what distinguished these 2 men. And so what happens is, now in chapter 18, all of the women come out, and David's coming back from one of his great battles, because Saul had him, singing to him and all that, but then he put him in charge of other things. And then he said, boy, you know what, son? And I think he started to get just a little bit jealous as it was. He had a jealous eye on him. And then he said, I'm going to make you in charge of all, I'm going to put you as a captain over all my mighty forces of battle. So he went out and he just won every campaign there was in battle. So he comes riding back into town, and the people are singing, all the ladies come out to sing, and they're singing, Saul has slain his thousands. And that made Saul feel really happy. Until they said, and David has slain his 10,000s. Uh-oh. Now Saul starts to get cranky. And the handle falls out of the shovel right here. This is where all of a sudden now Saul's like, that, and I think he starts to put it together that David is the new anointed king. And he knows that God has left him. He knows that. I mean, he's going through spiritual turmoil like no other. So then, as Saul had promised, whoever killed the giant, would get wealth and all this, and no taxes, but he would also get to marry his daughter. And he really wanted him to marry his oldest daughter, but that thing kind of fell through, and he wound up, Michal had fallen in love with David. Now Michal winds up being a mess, let's just put it that way. Later on, Jacob's like, don't say that, don't say it. No, they're always afraid of what I might say. Don't get that, I don't understand it. So, anyway, so Michal, she's fallen in love with David. So David marries Michal, all right? And this is Saul's daughter, so now he is but for Saul, it wasn't about, I want to reward you for killing Goliath. For Saul, it was about, you know what? If he marries my daughter, and then I can go ahead and I can kind of get him sent off into battle, they can kill him, and it's not my fault. My daughter still loves me. Everything's good. And so he's got this scheme going. He's always trying to get him killed. That's what he's sending him out into these battles, to get him killed. And so David just stays loyal and faithful to this king. And he stays loyal and faithful to everybody in his life. He never changes that. But then it says, then he says, in order to marry, now I think this is interesting. It's kind of comical, but at the same time, he says, all right, David, to marry my daughter Michael, David said, I can't afford the dowry. And he says, you don't have to pay me a dowry. He says, I just want 100 foreskins off of the Philistines, right? Now, that's kind of comical, because you think, well, now, he could have taken 4 eyeballs, 4 scalps, whatever, but he wants 100 foreskins, all right? So David goes out and he brings back 200. 200. Why is that significant? Because he went above the call of duty. Saul thought, I'll get him killed anyway. He's not ever going to bring back 100 foreskins. What's he do? He brings back 200. He's like, I did more than you asked me to do, right? More. Now, I feel sorry for those 200 fellas. But, that's all part of the battle there. But then, David, and while he's playing for Saul, on one occasion, Saul throws a spear and tries to pin him to the wall. And if you study the story, he tries to pin him to the wall. 8 times he tries to pin him to the wall. 8 with this spear. This is Saul was a he was a soldier in his own right. He was a warrior, man. This guy was a mighty warrior at one time when God was with him also. Now, how would you like to be singing and trying to bless the heart of somebody and encourage them, and then you're looking at this? Right? That's the face he got. Because this evil spirit came on Saul, and the jealousy whatever I do, it doesn't matter. This kid just succeeds. God is with him. And I think part of the problem was he remembered what it was like to have God in his life, how it was that God made him successful, and now he sees this little boy has everything that he could have had, and it makes him so mad, and he throws a spear at him and tries to pin him to the wall. That's the phrase that's used. Pins him, tries to pin him to the wall 8 times, but every time God gives him an escape, and he gets away. Now is where the bottom falls out of his life. This is where things start happening for David that are really difficult. Okay? Because right now, he has a great job. He works for the king. And he's learning all about this, kingship. But he has a high position. And his position is he's a commander of a mighty army. He's like second only to Saul. And by the way, Jonathan, being Saul's son, had the rightful heir to the throne of Israel, didn't he? You never one time see Jonathan throwing the spear at David. You never see Jonathan mad at David. In fact, you're going to see in a minute where Jonathan gave him his cloak, his robe, his belt, his sword. He gives him everything, saying, I'll honor you above me. It's okay for you to. Now, do you have a friend? Are we that kind of a friend where somebody is exalted over the top, but they get the promotion instead of us? That you're truly, really happy for them? Or are we get mad if they get our parking place? Or you jumped ahead of me in the line, let alone my throne, right? Think about this. Jonathan was happy for David no matter what happened, all right? And even knowing he was getting his rightful spot. Well, what happens is, the first crutch that David loses is his job, his position. It's like he has to leave. I mean, Saul's throwing spears at me. I calculate that's the end of this town. And he's out of here, right? That was from Tombstone, in case you didn't know. So, he's out of here, right? Now, what's he going to do? All right, think about it. Going from a national hero to a fugitive, a zero, and overnight, okay? And, read your mind. See, now, so what does he do? He runs up to his house, and he gets with Michael. And he comes to Michael, and he's like, your dad's trying to kill me. And she said, here's their plan. She knows the plan. She said, tomorrow morning, if you stay here tonight, tomorrow morning you'll be dead. We got to get you out of here. And so she takes him, and she takes him down through this, she lets him down through the wall, right? She lets him out the window, and she helps him escape, and he gets away. By God's providence, he gets away. But what did he lose? His wife and his house. It's not like he can go back tomorrow. It's not like in a month from now I can go back. He lost his wife and his house. So he's lost his job, his position, his wife, and his house. Now, isn't that a pretty big blow? Now he's leaning on these things for comfort and strength and protection. And God is trying to show him, I've got you, son. I've got you. Because to be the shepherd king that he became, he had to learn these lessons, right? All right. Now that story, where all of that is in 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 18, or 11 through 18. Okay, so we're just to kind of keep you up to where we are. Now, David he goes to Ramah, he tries to find old Samuel. Now remember, Samuel is his mentor. That's his, I told you about the guy that I was knit to. That's the guy that has advised him, anointed him. He's the old prophet of God. And he comes to him and says, Samuel, this is what's going on. And Saul's trying to kill me. I haven't done a doggone thing. I've been loyal. What do I do? So Samuel says, well, boy, we got to get you out of here. And he takes him to Naioth, and to a different town, right? And he tries to hide him. That's in 1 Samuel 19, 18 through 20. And then what happens is, Saul finds out where he's at. Now, I'm not sure exactly how much time is going on in between here, but not much. Saul finds out, and he starts an attack. Here, I'm going to get him. So Samuel says, well, son, you got to get out of here. Now what's he lost? Now he's lost his mentor, right? He's lost his mentor. The man who has advised him. The man who's always leaned on. The man who anointed him. So he's lost his job, his position, his wife, his home, and now he's lost his mentor. These are a lot of crutches, man. These are a lot of props that he's been leaning on. And so now he flees from Naioth to Ramah, and he finds Jonathan. All right? And that's 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 1. And here's what he says to Jonathan. What have I done? He exclaimed. What is my crime? How have I offended your father that he is so determined to kill me? He's really shook up. And so Jonathan is like, I don't think so. I really don't think. I think you're reading too much into it. And because Jonathan, his dad tells him everything, even the small things. But now old Saul realizes these boys they're buddies, and Jonathan doesn't even care that he's not going to get my throne. So I'm not even going to tell him what I want to do. And David says, Jonathan, he's trying to kill me. And Jonathan says, I just don't think so. He says, so they come up with a code. And what happens is they have this new moon festival at Saul's palace, right? And this is where everybody gets together. And of course, David, being the commander of an army, should be there. And he always was. But he said, tell your dad, Saul, he's telling Jonathan, he says, tell him that my brothers needed me at home. So now, here we are. David, the great man after God's own heart, is telling a lie. He's telling a fib. He's coming up with something deceitful. And he says, tell him that I won't be there because my brothers need me at home and I had to go. Please let me go. And so Jonathan, and then when he wasn't there, and then he says, to just back up a bit, he says, now, if he gets mad and he plans to kill me, you'll know it. He said, so here's what we'll do. Jonathan said, what I'll do is you go out there and hide by that stack of rocks. And tomorrow I'll bring out my little archer boy, all right? And we'll shoot the arrow. I'll shoot some arrows out there. And as he's going out to retrieve the arrows, I'll say, if everything is good, I'll say, and Dad's not going to kill you. They're on the left there. Just go off over to the left there and get them. Or on the other side. And he says, but if he is going to kill you and you need to get out of here, I'm going to say, go on out farther. The arrows are beyond you. Hurry quickly. And so that's their code. Well, sure enough, at this dinner, Saul says, where's David? And Jonathan says, well, Pop, he asked me, if he could go see his brothers, and his brothers needed him and all that. Saul blows a gasket. He blows a gasket. And then Jonathan sticks up for him. Now, this wasn't the only time Jonathan stood up for him. Jonathan stood up for him on several occasions. When Saul wanted to kill him, and David said, or Jonathan would say, Dad, this is a good man. He loves you. He serves you. He's loyal. And then Saul would back off a little bit. So Jonathan always had his back. Well, anyway, now he says, Dad, what are you so mad about? This guy, what has he done to you? And this ticks Saul off, and he throws a spear at Jonathan. Of course, he misses, all right? Now, old Saul's his cheese is blown slipped off his cracker at this point, as you can tell, all right? And so, as they had agreed, he goes out and with his little archer guy, and he says, all right, and he does his thing, and he lets David know. Now, they go ahead and they greet. After the boy goes back, he tells the boy, all right, take the arrows and the bow and go back to the house. And he runs out to meet Jonathan, or to meet David, and they embrace. and they cry hard, it says. The scripture says, and they cried really hard. In fact, here's what it says. It's in 1 Samuel 20, 35 through 41. Why would they be crying? It says, as soon as the boy was gone, David came out from where he had been hiding near the stone pile, and then David bowed 3 times to Jonathan with his face to the ground. David, knowing he was the anointed king, is still showing honor to his friend, isn't he? Both of them were in tears as they embraced each other and said goodbye. Especially David. Have you ever had to say goodbye and been in tears? Have you ever had to say goodbye to your best friend or someone in your life, or you had to give up something or someone, and you were in deep grief over it? That's where David was. That's where Jonathan was. And it was like, so David now lost what? His best friend. Because he probably won't see him again until now Jonathan gets killed in battle. And David, they don't know what's going to happen in their lives. And so here they are. So now these are the props that he has lost. Just in review. All right. Well, one more. David now runs to the town of Nob. And he goes to see the priest, the high priest Elimelech. And when he gets there, Elimelech says, why are you by yourself? It actually scares him. Why are you by yourself? He goes, the king has sent me on a special... He's starting to deceive again. He's telling another fib. Don't you love this? This is a man after God's own heart, but the Bible shows us that he's also a fibber and a liar, and he's trying to protect his own skin, and he's just like you and I. Come on. We would probably do the same thing. JC did it, right? Or JC's doing it, right? Whatever. Or Kason did it. Whatever. We do the same thing. So, where am I at here in this story? Oh.
You're going to get the last law.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Elimelech, it's the peanut butter brain, it's coming in, it's kicking in. Elimelech is being the high priest. He says, well, what? So David said, my men are coming later, they're coming later. By the way, I'm starving, you got anything to eat? And so he says, the only thing we have is the holy bread. And that's the bread in the temple before the Ark of the Covenant and so on. So he says, well, I can give you some of that. And so David's like, I'll take anything you got. He's starving. He's a man, he's a fugitive. He's been on the run. And with his life at danger. Now when you read the Psalms, if you read the little thing above the Psalms, a lot of times it'll tell you a Psalm of David when he was being chased, or he was in the cave of Adullam, or when Saul met him in the valley of whatever. And so you see kind of, or this is right after David and Goliath, or this is after David and Bathsheba. So you pay attention to those things, because those are what he wrote after these events in his life, after the wheels have been kicked out from under him. All right, so he tells him, he says, I need a weapon. You got a weapon? I got out of there so fast I didn't even get my own weapon. He said, the only thing I got is Goliath's sword. It's sitting back here wrapped up in it. I'll take it. Well, I can't imagine. I don't even know how he could carry it, right? Because this thing was so doggone heavy. So here it is. These are the crutches that have been removed. Elimelech now, he loses his pastor here, okay? Because, and then Saul comes in and he gets ticked off later on. Chapter 22, he gets ticked off about the fact that he finds out that Elimelech and 80 priests were hiding David. So he comes out and says, where is he? He says, he's not here. And he says, you're lying. He said, I don't lie. Priests don't lie. And he says, well then, was he here? Yes, he was. All right. And he kills 80 priests and Elimelech. Right there. Kills 80 of God's men. That's how off the charts this old boy had gotten with his jealousy to kill David. But David lost, real quickly, David lost his job, his position, his wife, his home, his mentor, his best friend, and his pastor. All in a very short time. And he loses one last thing, his pride. Now can you see what's happening? God is taking these things out. As David runs to them, God takes them out. So it's like, I'll step on this rock and the rock disappears. I'll step on this rock and the rock disappears. So it's like everything he's trying to find his strength in fails. Because it's always in people or circumstance. God is showing him, I have you. You are my anointed man. And I will defend you. So he loses his pride because he goes to Gath. Now who do we know came from Gath? Goliath. He now runs to the house of his enemies. Right? So now he gets to there, and he's recognized by King Achish. And he's like, uh-oh. And he knows now, this old boy's going to kill me. So he starts faking crazy. and he scratches at the gate, and he slobbers so hard it goes down in his beard, and he's just going bunker willies, right? And so the old king's like, and this is comical. I'm going to read a verse to you because this is, I think this is just hilarious. It's in 1 Samuel 21, verse 14 through 15. He tells his men, he says this, he says, "Do you think I need another madman? We have enough of those here already." You know, if you're a boss, you probably know what that feels like. We got enough crazies around here. We didn't need another one, right? And so that's what he says. So then, now what does David do? Now David he runs to the cave of Adullam. And I have a picture of this cave. I think this is kind of cool. And don't ask me how they got there. I mean, they have